Adam Smith is known as the father of economics, but most people have little idea why he's famous or what he said. This is a pity, because although Smith lived here in Scotland 250 years ago, his ideas are just as alive and relevant today. Smith's most famous book is his An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. Notice the title. Smith was interested in what the wealth of nations was and what produced it. Smith's book was radical. He was amongst the first to argue that the wealth of a nation consists in the wealth of all of its people. Wealth was a good thing because it improved the lives of all of the people in the nation. But perhaps most importantly, it helped the poor to escape poverty. Adam Smith lived at a time of rapid economic and social change. And Smith sought to explain this change by examining the role of trade in the division of labour. In a famous example, he tells us how one person working on their own can produce 20 pins in a day, but 10 people cooperating together can produce upwards of 48,000 pins in a day. This is a result of the use of modern factory techniques, where the skill and dexterity of the workers are improved and we can make increasing use of machines. But perhaps more important is the division of knowledge. By becoming specialists, we can rely on the labour of other specialists. Think of an everyday object like your mobile phone. None of us can build a mobile phone from scratch. But because we live in a society where the division of labour works, we're able to rely on each other's specialist skills and enjoy such goods. Smith illustrates how this network of specialists come together to improve our lives by asking us to consider all of the thousands of people who have interacted to bring something everyday like a phone into being. From the salesman who sold it to us, to the factory worker, to the supplier of plastics and electronics, to the sailors working on the ship that brought it to market. So though we may only know a few people we want to telephone, we depend upon countless thousands of others to be able to do something as simple as make that call. The division of labour creates wealth because it unlocks human talent and makes us interdependent. But the division of labour is limited by the extent of the market. If I live alone in the wilderness, I must be butcher, brewer and baker to myself. The greater the market, the greater the scope for specialisation, and the more we can make use of our individual talents and the resources at hand. Smith explains a phenomenon that is familiar to us all, people moving to cities in search of a better life. There's also an international division of labour. Smith tells us that we could devote time and effort to producing wine in Scotland. But that would be inefficient. Why not concentrate on making things like whisky and wool? Why make at home what you can buy cheaper abroad? It's a misdirection of effort and capital. Trade is explained by another feature of human beings, our desire to improve our situation. Smith didn't mean to suggest that we are naturally greedy. He meant that humans are always dissatisfied with their current circumstances and want to do better for themselves and their families. Smith believed that if people were left alone under a stable system of law, they would direct their activity in the most productive way that they could see in their own situation. By competing with each other in the marketplace, they would create the conditions for the creation of more and more effective production. Smith called this the simple and obvious system of natural liberty. But natural liberty can often be obstructed by politicians and powerful businessmen. Businessmen have an interest in protecting themselves from competition, and they can persuade governments that it's in the national interest to do so. But it's often the case that this sort of legislation simply gets in the way, because they can never be as effective at making decisions as the individuals who are involved in trade. In this world of globalisation, Adam Smith's study of international and domestic trade cuts straight to the heart of the forces that shape all of our lives. When we look around the world and see millions rising from poverty in India and China, we see the forces that Smith sought to explain. Adam Smith helped to shape the world that we live in, and there's no better place to start to understand that world than in the writings of this modest Scottish philosopher.
If you'd like to find out more, you can download this book for free at iea.org.uk.